everyone. As I can see a number of participants joining in from other countries. So it might be good morning in the US, good afternoon in the UK. So we are in that digital humanities moment. Welcome to this conversation, this presentation by Professor Alexa Alice Joubin. It's titled Generative AI and Digital Humanities. May I have 1 second? I'll just mute. Please, all participants, please mute. Some of the participants are joining in now, so please make sure that you're on mute. Thank you very much. All right. So, generative AI and digital humanities, pedagogical implications. AI, is especially ChatGPT sort of possibilities, are throwing us into two different difficult positions. One is we can be alarmist and conservative as teachers, or we can be faithless and become irrelevant in the scheme of things. These are two possibilities, two dangers that we have. But there is a third way, which is to become proactive, which is to use AI as assistive technology. And there's a lot of good work that's coming up from digital humanities sort of disciplines across the world. So this is a conversation of teachers, by teachers, for it's a space of teachers, for teachers, by teachers, to sort of think about how we can take a proactive step about this and adapt technology to do what we have been doing in a much better way. So this is a conversation hosted by the Dayapuram Arts and Science College for Women. It's a volunteer-run, academic volunteer-run managed college in Kerala. It's part of the faculty empowerment programs. I want to acknowledge the presence of the volunteers of the Dayapuram, principal and heads and teachers here, and also friends from across the country and across India and other countries who have come here. So welcome to this evening. And it's my privilege and honor to introduce Professor Alexa Alice Joubin, who is a professor of English, women's, gender, and sexuality studies, theater, international affairs, and East Asian languages and literature at George Washington University in Washington, D.C. She's also the co-director of digital humanities at George Washington University, and also the co-founder of Global Shakespeare's Digital Archive at Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT. She is a very distinguished scholar who is the inaugural recipient of Bell Hooks Legacy Award and holder of Martin Luther King Jr. Award. Professor Alexa Alice Joubin is also a very reputed Shakespeare scholar. To her credit, she's the author of Shakespeare in East Asia, OUP publication. She is also the co-editor of Shakespeare and the Ethics of Appropriation, and Who's It That Can Tell Me Who I Am, Lear's Shadow. She co-edited that work as well. She's also the co-author of Routledge book on race. It's part of their New Critical Idiom series. My brief introduction to her happened in 2019 at Queen's University, Belfast, United Kingdom, when we were both there for a conference which is hosted by a reputed scholar and friend, Professor Mark Burnett. And after that, we've been friends on social media, on Facebook, and I read about her work of using technology in an article that was on social media. And I wrote to her saying that we have this difficulty. What can we done? Just last week, 10 days ago. And Professor Alexa Alice Joubin was very gracious to actually tell us, offer a presentation for the teachers of India. And what's most amazing is that she said she would do this ex gratia without any payment for the as part of a community outreach work for the teachers of India. So it's amazing that she's been so kind and approachable in telling us about her experience her experiments with generative AI, and she's going to guide us, tell us about how we can work around this. We can work ahead with this new technology, which is actually a paradigm shift even in the history of computers. So it's a wonderful evening, precisely because of the presence of all of you here, also because we have such an exciting area, a new area to explore today. So welcome everyone. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here I present Professor Alexa Alice Joubin.
Thank you and welcome everyone. Hello, greetings from Washington, D.C. Thank you, Ashley, for bringing us together and your very generous introduction. I'm so glad we connected in Belfast and that you reached out at this key moment. It is my honor to speak to colleagues in India and around the world. I thank Dayapuram College for Women and the large group of volunteers who operate this institution for organizing this event. My own work has a great deal of focus on social justice, and tonight is part of my community outreach work this year. I've been speaking about this generative AI, AI tools like ChatGPT that could create textual and visual outputs based on human inputs, based on prompts. And there are a lot of things going on, a lot of issues to consider. Just a kind of a quick gauging the temperature of the room, I would like you to answer a very quick poll about your experience. In front of you in Zoom, you should see the poll now, which is live. Basically, what experiences have you had with ChatGPT? We understand ChatGPT 3.5 remains the free version with some limits. ChatGPT 4, you need to pay for subscription. The votes are coming in and they are really exciting. I'm going to share with you in a moment regarding people's kind of varied experiences, how far along you have been. Have you used it to proofread something, to enhance foreign language learning, perhaps? Have you thought about social biases embedded within and use this as a survey instrument? I have. And you can also, of course, use it as a sounding board to generate some ideas, maybe in teaching. And it might save time with bureaucratic work if you routinely have to write a lot of memos. So that's another possibility. I am going to end. You have this in front of you on Zoom for those who just joined us. If you would just click, in terms of your experiences with ChatGPT, you can click more than one box. So for the interest of time, I'm going to end this and share our result. So here you can see in front of you the results. 32% of you have used ChatGPT to proofread text in some capacities, including languages you are proficient in. And 18% of you have used ChatGPT to learn foreign languages, giving a translational task, for example, correcting grammar. I found this to be a learning aid for my students whose first language is not English. So it does work as a free tool to provide equity so that those who are less articulate now feel more confident in sharing their ideas, so that the classroom is not dominated merely by native speakers of English. Number 3, 11% of you said you've tried to use ChatGPT to detect social biases. And this is certainly one area of my research. how do you detect social biases? You could do surveys, right? If you're a sociologist, it's always about numbers. But I believe biases can also be gauged and measured qualitatively, not just quantitatively. But how do you do that? Go around asking people, reading some books and picking things out. One interesting way is to use ChatGPT. It anonymizes public voices, right? And it's a remixing machine. Think of it like a machine that mixes your morning smoothie. In it, it'll repeat, because it's a pattern recognition machine, it'll repeat these biases. And I find it really useful as a form of survey instrument. Number 4, that's the largest number of people, 61% of you said that you've used it to generate teaching or research ideas. I suppose by that you mean perhaps feeding it some ideas, trying to see where it might take you. Maybe there's one aspect you hadn't thought of. It's sometimes useful in that way. And 43% of people in this room have used ChatGPT to do routine formulate tasks. Right? All right, so thank you for chiming in. That's really useful as a starter. We have next one. So you've all had varied experiences. What anxieties do you have as educators? So in front of you here is another poll. Again, you can choose, you can have more than one answer here. What kind of challenges do you think it brings to higher education? Perhaps it's the concern about cheating. There's also concern about misinformation, disinformation. Maybe students don't understand AI, so it's a question of AI literacy. It's a literacy problem. Or maybe there's this idea of thinking machine-produced texts, they're grammatically correct, but invariably mediocre at the present stage, and somehow seeing that as okay. And so perhaps using it as a model, which is problematic. And last but not least, maybe there are a lot of biases being repeated in these AI texts and that people are not very aware. So many more are sharing their voices now. They are chiming in. Out of our 80 people in our session, about half of you have voted. Please continue. Let me tell you, let's start with the good news, something lighthearted. You know, ChatGPT is actually invented by cat. If you would understand the H is silent, it's actually ChatGPT. There's a cat in there who randomly walks on the keyboard and generate all those texts that people admire as God. My favorite about AI is when Stephen Hawking, the famous physicist who's still alive, during an interview, it was a hypothetical question at that time, right, about AI, about his take on AI. And he told this joke saying that the day would come when a computer would be able to speak, and the day has come, right? We live in that era now. And the first question humans have is to ask the computer, the talking computer, does God exist? And the computer said, the computer unplugged itself, right, from the power source and continued to talk and say, there is now. You're welcome. So the results are in, and you can see in front of you the results I'm sharing right now. So 67% of you worry about cheating, whether it's plagiarism or outsourcing homework to ChatGPT, pass it off as their own work, and so on. So this is such a great area, and there are a lot of apps out right now. They are AI driven. To detect if it's AI, would certainly touch on that. It's problematic in terms of technological solutionism. It's the ideology that believe in, simplifying our social problems and saying everything can be solved if I have the right algorithm in place. And the emergence of the latest iteration of AI has deepened that kind of belief. And I find that belief very problematic. Technological solutionism, rather than identifying complex sources of the problem, taking a human and humanistic approach. It's always algorithm. 50% of people worry about the lack of critical AI literacy, as well as students emulating these texts and thinking that they are generated by God. Whether it is, of course, unethical to pass off something that is not yours as your work, right? When it comes to this kind of AI, however, because it depends entirely, it's not autonomous. It depends entirely on human input and output, garbage in, garbage out. Technically, the students could say that they did kind of half the work, or maybe 1/4 of the work, because it started with their prompt, right? Their prompt has to be inspiring enough to get some kind of response, and there's curatorial, editorial processes involved if they're not too lazy. My favorite, of course, is people turning in work that begins with, as a large language model, I can only, so they didn't even edit that out. That's clearly AI talk. 30% of people here are thinking about AI-generated biases and discriminatory responses. Very, very often these are subtle, right? Because the AI, because the censorship within the mechanism is programmed to not be explicit. That's also part of what we are fighting. All right, so this is the story that Ashley spoke of. Ashley, if you'd be so kind to put the link in the chat so people can follow, that would be great. This is a new story about how I teach with AI. I teach Shakespeare and critical theory with AI tools. My belief is that it is here to stay, and we already live in an inquiry-driven culture. We live in an AI-enhanced world. So to pretend that it doesn't exist or has no correlation to the humanities is simply a bit of an ostrich. It's impossible. So and it's impossible to ban it. So I actually use it in its various stages of development with my students. And they saw firsthand what it can realistically accomplish, what it cannot do. And we moved along from there, rather than making accusations or assumptions. So more on that. My curriculum design principles are therefore, number one, to teach with technologies rather than teach against technologies. Remember, books and pens. Some people say, let's go back to handwriting, or exam. These are technologies too. These are technologies. Technologies are not evil. For people who identify as disabled, for example, assistive technologies, prostheses are very important. They are enabling. So it's not as simple as saying we are in the humanities and I'm against technologies. That's quite a problematic kind of statement. And technologies, if deployed well, can lead to inclusiveness, enhance access, enhance equity in the classroom. They can be part of the multimodal channels for knowledge distribution and creation. So I'm not here to sing the praises. I'm here to say that this AI is neither a devil nor an angel. It's a tool, like many other tools. We simply have to see it for what it is. So what exactly is it? If you compare it to Googling, so most people are familiar with, right? I would say this: do not ask Michael Jordan to play baseball. That's ridiculous. Maybe he's a good athlete, but something will be off, isn't it? Because it's not basketball. So the problem is with a lot of people and students, they are asking Michael Jordan to play baseball without properly understanding what this AI tools is. It's a case of kind of misuse. So when you Google, typically you type in keywords, not full sentences. That's one key difference, right? And the other key difference is you get a list. It's an index of the World Wide Web. And these are rabbit holes you can go down, each one. So there's a bit more, it's a more involved process. You're thinking about it, which one is reliable and so on. Of course, the ranking algorithm cannot be overlooked because there's the commercial interest involved. If you pay up, for example, you might rank higher in terms of your result or the book you want to sell. So those are the problems, but it has a sense of openness. So some people see it as less problematic because it doesn't lecture to you. With ChatGPT, you would type in full sentences such as, what are the key differences between race and gender? And you can elaborate and so on. And out comes the result in the form of fully formed speeches. Fully formed speeches. And the key differences here is that this is a more friendly interface because it's conversational. It appears to be processing natural language, right? And it generally organizes ideas into paragraphs, is capable of saying on the one hand, on the other hand. None of this Google can give you, but it's also a closed down process. It doesn't suggest further readings, for example, right? And so it gives the false impression this is the one answer, it's authoritative, it's right there in front of you. Now, the design goals are different, as I mentioned. So this is a quick recap. Google, these search engines are an indexing portal. They send you in some direction, not always the right direction. They are not themselves a content provider. There are, of course, other algorithmic biases, but generative AI, in contrast, such as GPT, is a content aggregator, right? Trained on large data sets, and it'll regurgitate some most likely patterns of combination of words. So the goal, Google doesn't want you to linger. It's sending you on its way, right? Including ads. So the idea is for you to click somewhere. That's the business model, so that it can make money. ChatGPT wants you to linger. You stay longer, the more financially interesting it'll be for the company. So stay there, chat more, and it's a kind of self-contained box. It's a remixing machine. So these are the key differences. At the core, ChatGPT is a statistical model. It's based on the probability of a given sequence of words. And we have a lot of grounds to cover. So I'm not going to linger over. I'm happy to do follow-up lectures when there are future opportunities. This whole thing is actually can be broken down into 10 segments. So let's say you start typing not all heroes wear. According to the probabilistic machine, the most likely word is cape. Not all heroes wear capes. So this is a machine designed to generate the most conventional, the most likely responses. You can also say not all heroes wear capes, but, right? If you don't want a noun, the most likely other word would be but. You can see it calculating the statistical likelihood here. So for us humans, we're asking an infinite number of questions, but for the machine, you really repeatedly ask the same question. What are the most likely words to follow what I just said? That's all we've been doing. So it's rather boring, in fact. This machine doesn't hallucinate, it doesn't think. It's simply all about combining words. And that's why it's incapable of saying, I don't know, because it's not programmed to say that. In fact, it doesn't know what it doesn't know that there's gap in the knowledge. It doesn't know anything to begin with. Its task, singular task, is just to keep generating words. And that's why some people will say, oh, it's hallucinating, it's making things up. But of course, I wouldn't expect otherwise. So moving along, we have our next activity I would like you to go to this site, slido.com. It's also in the chat, slido.com. And we have a code 3214943. You will be in our playground for today. And you will see there's on the top, this poll. So there you can type in words that are associated with ChatGPT, separate those single words with comma, and we will have a word cloud. You can also, as I speak, type in your reactions. It can be exclamation mark, it can be questions you may have, and I'll visit them when I conclude the presentation. And that's under the Q&A tab. So you go to slido.com, you have the polls tab where you type in words you associate with ChatGPT. And you can go to Q&A tab where you don't necessarily have to ask a question. You can write your comments, your reflection, your thoughts, and you can do this live as I go. All right. And it's in the chat in here on Zoom, slido.com. I shall continue. So what does ChatGPT do? Noam Chomsky, famous linguist, said that it's just a statistical engine, like I said before, for extrapolating the most likely conversational responses. But the problem is also, it's also the most conventional response. Number two, it is really a black box. It's a probabilistic model that operates as a black box device. It will produce information without revealing its internal working. So even the human coders are not able to fully explain its output, how the AI reaches these decisions. That's the fuzzy model. And for those who just joined us, slido.com is where we're going. So in conclusion, what ChatGPT really is that there are 3 items here, and these are from my own research. I'm a performance studies scholar. So I realized this really is a performance machine. Nobody has been talking about it. This so-called AI is a performance machine. It's an aesthetic instrument. It is not an instrument of reason. It is not an epistemological tool in the sense of you can ask it and it will have knowledge. It doesn't have knowledge. It doesn't have domain knowledge. All it has is combination of words. So nothing there can be trusted. Why do I say aesthetic instrument? Well, it's like a remixer to make your morning smoothie, mixing all those words from public data sets. So it puts an impromptu performance each time that you give it a prompt. Prompt, people use the word prompt engineering, but nobody thought of a prompt book in theater. For me, this is a prompt book. You give it a prompt. It's like you're giving a performance artist a prompt. You know, tonight you should put on this performance, and this machine looks into belly, looks at most likely combination words based on your cue, and it gives you a performance. And people say it's human-like. Right, and people say there's intelligence in it, artificial intelligence. It is artificial, all right, but there's no intelligence. So AI is a bit of a misnomer. It does not know anything, and it's not designed to know anything. That's our current bottleneck. In fact, the founding father of AI said as much. Unless we have revolution in algorithm, the AI is not likely to go anywhere dramatic in the foreseeable future, because we need to transcend this probabilistic model. But right now, we're stuck here. It already does impressive work, but it's just a statistical machine. Number 2, ChatGPT is also a simulacrum machine. It simulates human speeches, right? People don't talk enough about performative simulation. It simulates what we do in order to give the impression of creating realities. And I draw this from the famous theorist Jean Baudrillard's work on the simulacrum. So this AI really is a simulacrum machine. And it's like Disney. If you go to Disney, you look at the copy of realities. It's not quite right, but it's kind of close enough, right? For entertainment. Number 3, this is a social collaboration tool that has been underplayed, right? People tend to think of it's a one-on-one relationship. Me and my AI. I use ChatGPT to do X, Y, Z. And AI uses the first person pronoun too, I. As it'll say, my apologies. Sometimes if you press it, right, it's always first person. This first person responses, but that characterization is really misleading. It ignores the fact that this AI, and by the way, I'm happy to share this entire slide deck with everyone, so there's no worry about copying everything at all, right? And the slido.com link remains useful, not just for your live responses, but for my sharing afterwards. So don't worry. It actually aggregates public voices and becomes a ghost of public voices. By ghost, I mean a version of it, right? It sounds familiar, but also not so familiar. When we talk to this AI, we're talking to ourselves because we contributed in the first place to the large data sets. It's an aggregation of what humans have expressed in the past 20 years. And so this social collaboration tool illuminates previously hidden concordances between humans. And if we think of it this way, we might change our relations to it, and it's more productive. Next month, my Michael Best and my edition of King Lear is coming out from Broadview Press. And we selected this cover. It's a quote from King Lear. Who is it that can tell me who I am? This is the mad Lear who's very angry at his unaccommodating daughters and asking this rhetorical question. So my answer is ChatGPT, our shadow, always tells us who we are. People tend to forget that. So what ChatGPT really is that it's the public shadow. It tells us who we are, it reflects on who we are because it doesn't create things from vacuum. It creates things from speeches and text that have been digitized. You know, it's based on human outputs to begin with. So it's based on what the society has said collectively in the data set. Now consider the next scenario. If we train ChatGPT on pre-500 BC data sets, it will insist that the Earth is flat. That is because everybody was saying the Earth is flat. ChatGPT doesn't have independently verifiable knowledge source, right? So it's simply reflecting that's what I said earlier. It's a performance machine, it's a simulacrum machine, but also it's a survey instrument. It collects the mean of opinions. Remember, not the truth, right? Means opinion, that's very different from truth. It's the mathematical average of what the humanity has produced textually. So it's trained, of course, on late 20th century and early 21st century data sets, and it'll regurgitate things in a reassuring tone, telling us what we think we already know. So just consider that. It might say the Earth is flat if you have a time machine and bring it back to a specific era. That's it. And that's what it is doing. And I believe it's important to convey to students and remind them of these aspects. All right, so what can we do? First of all, I would acknowledge and embrace that we live in an AI-mediated world. We already live in an inquiry-driven culture before ChatGPT. If you ever used predictive keyboard when typing on your phone, trying to text someone, right? That is actually a form of AI prediction. If I've ever used Google Map to look for directions, all of these are particular AI algorithm. They may not talk per se like ChatGPT, but the difference is minuscule. So living in an AI-mediated world means embracing ambiguity, right? Authorship the question reemerges in relevance. Who exactly is the author? Does it matter? Is AI the author or the public? We need to ask, right? In all the AI outputs, since it's not from vacuum, it's simply a recombination of available public text. Who exactly is speaking? For me, that's actually less, it's an important philosophical question, but in teaching, it's less productive. I would not focus on detecting AI work. I focus on the quality. I don't care if it's AI assisted. When students submit something to me, is the quality good, right? I think that's a more productive one. If the quality is not good, what can we do to enhance it? So the other thing is that we are learning to work with opaque situations, because with AI remodeling human behaviors and speech outputs, we have a lot of opaque situations. Not everything is black and white anymore. And I think we need to confront that, embrace that, learn to live with it. Even in literary studies, I think there are a lot of revolutions, right? Since the proclamation of the author is dead. We don't know a lot. Take my field, for example, Shakespeare's verifiable biography. And yet we engage with works that go under the name of Shakespeare. The third item here is that living in this AI-mediated world, we need to make students understand that AI is socially bounded within the context of its use. That's really important to think about. It's socially bounded. It's not, again, you need to transcend this illusion of me and my AI. There's no such thing. AI is representative of aggregated and anonymized public voices. You're interacting with part of yourself. And we can therefore guide students for more intentioned interactions with AI rather than seeing it as some kind of shortcut or misusing the tool. I'll show you a number of uses very soon. There are many ways to use it. It's not about teacher asked me to write an essay, I'm going to put in teacher's prompt, boom, that's it. Actually, there are many other more intentioned, productive interactions. And in the process, students have a lot to learn as well. So it's a tool, but like all tools, you have to use it correctly. Stop, if you imagine something to be a hammer, everything you see is a nail. And so it begins to limit your imagination. You can no longer think outside the box. We can provide students with explicit rules of the game, what kind of uses are permissible, and guide them on and modeling best behavior. How do we use it exactly, rather than outright banning it, or simply saying that you can't use any AI tool. In fact, if you look at Microsoft Word, right, it can help you correct grammar. Part of that is AI algorithm. So there really is no way you think of AI as only ChatGPT, but it's already everywhere in our life. So again, I want to emphasize this point made by Jaron Lanier, that AI is a form of social collaboration when we see it like that, rather than as a witch, as a myth, kind of mythologizing it. If we see it as a form of social collaboration, it's more actionable. We will be in the engine room, which is made of people rather than God. Is there a God in the AI, right? So to summarize, we should not anthropomorphize AI. That's currently the journalistic preferences in terms of vocab. It hallucinates, for example, it declares love. All of these metaphors matter because it dictates how we think, and it dictates what we're not thinking about. We need to identify the real substantive challenges posed by this technology rather than hyped ones. And we shouldn't pretend that AI has no impact on our industry. It has impact everywhere, on all sectors of the society. Just the form of impact is different. Say you teach creative writing, and we say that, well, AI can't really write poetry. It does a mediocre job and so on. But the interesting thing is it's a recombination of words. Wouldn't poets do that as well, right? And at the end of the day, what do you gain by mythologizing AI? Whether declaring that it's a devil or an angel, none of that helps. I see people continuing to join us. For those who just joined us, we're on slido.com, and the code is there in the chat box. That is where you can look at the poll and type your reactions and questions. So I'm from Taiwan originally, and in Taiwanese, to say crisis, it consists of two characters. The first indicates danger, the second actually hints at opportunity. So crisis is both a threat and opportunity. And we'll start with the red one, the kind of threat that this technology is posing, the challenges. The problem here is that it becomes more difficult for all of us, including our students, to sort through conflicting info about this disruptive innovation, right? Because it's much harder now to identify the sources of information, whether it's human-driven, or whether it's machine-produced. And the technology has the ability to amplify pre-existing social biases en masse because it's produced really fast. Students may mistake synthesis for critical thinking. So the AI is very good at synthesis. It'll ask you anything, you can ask it anything, it'll produce lists, for example, but that in itself is not thinking, that in itself is not knowledge. So this challenge, of course, existed before the AI arrived. It just now it's on steroids. So these are the challenges. But at the same time, it gives opportunities. The first is metacognition. So I already hinted at this. I didn't use this word before. When you become aware, when you become cognizant of your relationship to technologies, you become very self-aware of how you're using it. That's metacognition. When you become aware of your decision process, deliberation process, how you write, why do I think this? Why do I think that? Why do I think in a particular manner? That's metacognition. So that's a wonderful opportunity presented to us by this technology. We can kind of guide students to think more about that. And the craft writing as well. We no longer write from scratch, but students going forward as employable skills going into this AI society is that they need curatorial and editorial skills and to be very well versed in machine ethics. So the AI can be a heuristic tool in this context. When we encourage students to speak up, to engage with class materials, when they become passionate about a topic, have a lot of things to say from the bottom of their heart, they're less likely to outsource writing to AI. A lot of people like to complain, students these days, they don't read, they don't write. That is not true. They do read a lot, they write a lot, maybe full of junk, but they do. Because a lot of reading and writing activities take place on social media. In responding to their friends, responding to something on TikTok that they're really interested in, nobody outsources to AI. That's just too cumbersome. They just say it directly from their heart. So that's what we are tackling here. You know, do you really have something to say? What do you feel about this topic? Rather than something that is abstract, and we can do that by linking historical material to the present day, making it relevant so that they find that they have a stake in it, they have something to say. And one thing I did was debate. So one danger of outsourcing, of course, you think predict technology is very convenient, as you see in the illustration here. Even your phone would do this all the time, right? Giving a predictive text, what is the most likely next word? That's not ChatGPT, but it's a predecessor. There's a danger because we would end up being allowed to think only one of three thoughts deemed possible by the machine. Now, the machine, of course, doesn't clamp down our thoughts, right? But if you use predictive technology long term, that is the consequence because you would default to one of those thoughts. And so ChatGPT is really a form of autocomplete on steroids. So if you follow along, our first tool, it is free and it is built on ChatGPT's tool, but it is not ChatGPT itself. It is located here. I'm just sending it to you in the chat. So this one is customized. Part of my focus has been to teach students to ask in-depth and effective research questions. These questions tend to be open-ended rather than close-ended, rather than a yes-no question. So this particular tool, this small tool, can help us. You can go in and enter your not-so-perfect question. It'll generate open-ended questions as suggestions, not to do the homework for you, but as a sounding board, as a partner. So for example, if you were to type in is Othello, Shakespeare's Othello, is it a racist play? Not a very interesting question, isn't it? As you can see in the response here, first of all, it tells you what the likely answer might be, right? And then suggest maybe here are three versions of that question that can elicit more conversation. What themes does Othello explore, right? And of course, we do this in person in class, but when students are on their own, or maybe students who are introverts, who are a bit more shy, well, maybe there's face issue. They don't feel like comfortable asking the teacher or their classmates. This is a perfect tool. It's imperfect, right? But it's a good, but it's non-judgmental. It's free, and use it at home. And so you can keep practicing this, and your questions can become more and more elaborate. And in each round of interaction, you can get to think more and improve. The other is very similar, and this one is called Fermat. Fermat.ws. So this one is, so there are a lot of apps out there that are similar to this, and they're more useful than ChatGPT because it's purpose-driven. So the previous one, for example, is specifically just to generate alternatives to the open-ended questions. This one has been tested. They're all built on the large language model. This one has been tasked with generating counter-arguments. You would put in a statement. It'll help you think of pros and cons. For example, Shakespeare's Othello is a racist play. It depicts a Black man in unfavorable light, student would write. Now, what are some possible counter-arguments to this? For example, it can reinforce negative stereotypes. So those boxes in red are more or less in agreement with it. And you have green, which is kind of a different angle. It's very, very simplistic, but it is a starting point to help students think of aspects they hadn't thought of. One other activity I have done, this is using ChatGPT itself. I would ask ChatGPT to generate a 500-word essay based on my elaborate prompt, and we would collectively peer review it. One problem with peer review in writing is that I found that students are uncomfortable critiquing their peers' work. They only say nice things, right? But now it's like a lab. It's a machine generating this. Psychologically, they certainly feel more comfortable and they can critique the essay for real. We can also use ChatGPT responses to collect stereotypes and biases. We ask students to actively identify those in the output. So in other words, I'm not using it as an epistemological tool. I'm using it as a survey instrument. I'm using it as Humanities lab to give me a lot of specimens so that we can cut them open and analyze them. in asking students to interact with ChatGPT, I'm teaching them the Socratic method. Just in this case, students play the role of a teacher, of the conversation initiator. They throw in questions in the back and forth. They correct the AI text biases. They have to demonstrate their mastery of domain knowledge. Eventually, this is more toward the end of semester. And so they are no longer passive recipients of knowledge, but here it's an active participant. So that's another possibility. I can go into the nitty-gritty details, for example, at a later point, but I would stress that with this approach, we can finally go from AI to AI, from artificial intelligence to academic integrity. Integrity is not something that you dictate or ban. I believe it has to come from the heart of the participants to recognize that it is meaningful rather than something that teacher says.
Thank you so much. That was really an insightful and very useful. I mean, a lot of hands-on things, but also about the philosophy of it. I mean, I was like, AI is neither a witch nor a myth, and we should use it in a different way. And things that you said about, as a performance studies person, about the aesthetics, being an aesthetic instrument and a simulacrum machine and a social collaboration tool, which can even do, be used in Socratic method, in developing this, and also peer review. These are all very, very interesting concepts, the philosophy of it. And, and what I really liked about what you said was, students will need curatorial and editorial skills more than anything else. That's really, where we are going. And the other thing is, there's so much information available. There's so much, inside. There's so much going on around. And our speciality is that not that we have the best of things, but we are interested in the students. We are interested in what they have to say, what they have to think. And for that, how AI can be used in smart, powerful, effective, and also ethical way. And I think that's an amazing set of things that you said. And yes, we have access to the slides, so I'm sure all of us will go back to it and look at it for our own use and also a better understanding. So thank you so much. It was really a wonderful session, and the way you were talking about King Lear really had me as a fellow Shakespearean. I was thrilled by that.
So how do you have students use ChatGPT as an interlocutor? A traditional college essay might be thought of as a single person playing tennis against a practice wall, right? You write for a teacher, that's it. Here, with the Socratic method, it is a bit more social. It is using ChatGPT as an AI opponent to practice tennis on. It is more lively, it's more interesting, you learn more. But why AI? Because you can practice taking on the role of a conversation initiator, and rather than being so passive. So for example, my assignment asks students to initiate a series of chain of thought prompts and follow-up questions. So giving a lot of prompts to the ChatGPT, not single sentence, but kind of elaborate enough. And then you collect the chatbot's answers. And your essay consists of your meta-critical analysis of this, so critique the biases, inconsistent arguments, factual errors, and so on in the responses, right? The fundamentals, of course, are that you as a student would have to know the material pretty well in order to achieve this. So this promotes metacognition, it promotes domain knowledge. It's no longer just writing for one person, but it's to showing the class your interaction with the ChatGPT, right? Its shortcomings, your critique, and what you learn from this. So it's not a traditional type of college essay, but an essay that is a bit of a record of back and forth of this tennis practice. Next question, how do we understand the concept of the author in the context of using ChatGPT, especially when we use it as an interlocutor and in the context of AI becoming something like an all-knowing God? So first of all, this AI in the present form, in this current generation, it knows nothing. There's no domain knowledge. It doesn't independently know things. According to Noam Chomsky's linguistic analysis, it doesn't process natural language either, because there's no grammar. It's about statistical likelihood of the next word. That's all it knows. It does it really well. So it's a polished facade that has fooled many people and triggered debates that use anthropomorphizing metaphors. So this question of the author becomes really interesting. I would say it is a bit of a co-author because it's not autonomous, right? And it's not a sentient machine. It really is based on human prompts. So to cite ChatGPT text, the correct citation, scientifically accurate, should be to begin with the prompt, because otherwise there's no context. What is the input, right? You give us the output, but what is the input? On which date, which version of this machine? I think that's how we would talk about this question of authorship. And this, would the human own the text just because they would say, I generated it? I believe no, because it's a remixing machine and it's the publics who have been forced perhaps to contribute to it, right, to the data sets, often against their will. You know, Getty Images, the large company providing licensing images for use, they're actually suing OpenAI and saying that they use their images to train their AI without authorization. Many more lawsuits are going on right now. So we are at the intersection of modern day copyright law and philosophical understanding or reimagination of authorship. I wouldn't say these AI tools author anything. It's really looking at a large number of examples and recombining the visual patterns or the textual patterns and give you something based on your input. So it is not a full-fledged author by itself.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Alexa. It was a wonderful session, very useful, very insightful, and such an amazing time all of us had. I know I'm speaking for, I'm sure I'm speaking for everyone for this wonderfully insightful session. Also enabling, you know, one of the things that we feel helpless because of various things, and it's very enabling in, you know, it's hands-on. So thank you so much. Thank you for taking the time out. Please do come to Dayapuram sometime. Come to India. Come to Dayapuram. There are people from everywhere here. Thanks a lot. And I also want to thank all the fellow academicians, teachers, friends, the people of Dayapuram who are all here. And it was an amazing time.